Warren Buffett is an American investor, business magnate, and philanthropist. He is the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway and is currently the sixth wealthiest person in the world with a net worth of $100 billion, making him one of the most successful investors in the world. Warren was born in Omaha, Nebraska on August 30th, 1930. Buffett was a middle child with two sisters, and his father, Howard Buffett, was a congressman. His education began at Rose Hill Elementary School. As a young boy, he developed an interest in investing and business. His father once took him to the New York Stock Exchange when he was 10 years old. When he was 11 years old, he bought 3 shares of City Services for himself and 3 more shares for his sister Doris Buffett. While searching through a selection of books one day, Buffett came across a book titled 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000. As an aspiring millionaire, he reasoned that if he did everything the book said and made $1,000 1,000 times, he'd be a millionaire. Much of Warren's childhood was spent pursuing various entrepreneurial endeavors. In one of his first businesses, Buffett sold Coca-Cola bottles, chewing gum, and weekly magazines from one door to the next. He also worked in a grocery store owned by his grandfather. However, at the age of 12, his father was elected to the United States Congress in Washington, D.C., where he would move and later attend Alice Steele Junior High School, previously named Woodrow Wilson High School. In high school, Buffett made money through a variety of means, including selling stamps, golf balls, and delivering newspapers. He filed his first income tax return when he was 14 years old in 1944 and took a $35 deduction on his tax return for using his bike and his watch on his newspaper route. At 15 years of age, he made upwards of $175 per month by delivering newspapers for the Washington Post. When he was 15 years old, he bought a used pinball machine for $25 and placed it in a local barbershop. Within the next few months, he owned several machines, placing them in 3 barbershops across Omaha. Eventually, he chose to sell this business to a war veteran for $1,200. As a 14-year-old, he also bought a 40-acre farm worked by a tenant farmer using $1,200 of his savings. He graduated in 1947 with a senior yearbook photo that read, "Likes Math, a future stockbroker." Buffett attended college at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania in 1947. He initially didn't want to go to college, but ended up going anyway after being pressured into it by his father. In 1949, Warren had a crush on a woman whose boyfriend played the ukulele. In a futile attempt to win her favor, Warren taught himself how to play the ukulele himself, but he wasn't able to capture her attention. When he was 19 years old, he transferred to the University of Nebraska, where he graduated with a bachelor's in business administration. He then applied to Harvard University, but was rejected, so he ended up enrolling at Columbia University's business school after finding out that Benjamin Graham, the author of The Intelligent Investor and one of Buffett's longtime role models, taught there. He graduated in 1951 with a master's in economics and went on to attend the New York Institute of Finance. By the time Warren Buffett finished college, he had accumulated savings of about $9,800, which adjusted for inflation comes out to be about $112,000 today. Buffett found out that Benjamin Graham was on the Geico Insurance Board in 1951. One Saturday, he proceeded to take a train to Washington, D.C. and knocked on the front door of Geico headquarters when a janitor let him in. He sat down with the Vice President Lorimer Davidson and for 2 hours proceeded to talk about the insurance business, with Davidson later recalling that after only 15 minutes of talking to Buffett that he had found him to be an extraordinary man. Buffett admired Graham so much that he offered to work for him for free, to which Graham refused. He would later return to Omaha, where he worked as a stockbroker while teaching an investment principles night class at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. His students, on average, were more than twice his age. Warren's recently adopted music interest in the ukulele wasn't completely useless, as it ended up playing a role in capturing the interest of Susan Thompson, which eventually led to his marriage with her. He married Susan Thompson in 1952, and they had their first child, Susan Alice, the very next year. In 1954, Buffett began working at the Benjamin Graham Partnership, where his salary was $12,000 per year, which adjusted for inflation comes out to be $121,000 today. The same year, Buffett had his second child, Howard Graham. Benjamin Graham closed the partnership in 1956. By this point, Buffett's total savings amounted to about $174,000, which adjusted for inflation comes out to be about $1.73 million today. He then started the Buffett Partnership Limited. Buffett bought a 5-bedroom house in Omaha for $31,500 in 1957, which is actually the same house he lives in today. He had his third child, Peter Andrew, in 1958. He He also during this time period became interested in the Sanborn Map Company, a stock that was trading for $45 per share, but had an investment portfolio worth $65 per share. Buffett eventually purchased 23% of the outstanding shares for the company and acquired a seat on their board of directors, where he would ally himself with other dissatisfied shareholders and end up controlling 44% of the shares. By 1959, Buffett had been operating 6 partnerships, and this was the year where he met his future partner and longtime friend, Charlie Munger. The Sanborn Map Company made up 35% of the Buffett partnership's total assets. The board of directors for Sanborn eventually offered to repurchase shares at fair value to avoid a proxy fight, which led to 77% of the company's outstanding shares being turned in, resulting in a whopping 50% return on Warren's investment in just 2 years. Buffett finally passed the $1 million mark in net worth in 1962, when the total value of his partnerships amounted to $7.1 million, of which he owned $1.025 million. After merging his partnerships into one, he acquired a textile manufacturing firm known as Berkshire Hathaway. The Buffett partnership started off by buying shares of Berkshire for $7.65 per share. However, in 1965, when the partnership began buying shares of Berkshire more aggressively, they were buying the shares for $14.86 per share when the company's working capital was $19 per share, excluding the value of Berkshire's factory and equipment. He eventually took control of the company and liquidated his partnership in 1969. Berkshire's business was moved into the insurance business by Buffett, later stating that the textile business was his worst trade ever. The 1970s marked the beginning of Buffett's now famous annual letter to shareholders. Buffett was a frugal man, living solely on his $50,000 per year salary and some outside investment income. In 1977, Warren and his wife Susan began living separately, but Susan arranged for Buffett to meet with a woman named Astrid Minks, who would end up living with Warren while Susan left to pursue her career as a singer. The three of them were very close with each other, often sending out Christmas cards with all 3 of their names signed at the bottom: Warren, Susie, and Astrid. By 1985, the last Berkshire mill from their core business was sold. In 1988, Buffett began buying shares of the Coca-Cola Company, which would go on to be one of his greatest investments ever made. He eventually managed to buy up to 7% of the company for a total investment of $1.02 billion. In 1990, Warren Buffett officially became a billionaire once Berkshire Hathaway started selling Class A shares priced at $7,175 per share. Warren was named top money manager of the 20th century by the Carson Group ahead of John Templeton and Peter Lynch in 1999. Warren entered into an interesting trade in 2002 where he traded $11 billion worth of forward contracts and ended up seeing a return of $2 billion by 2006. In 2004, Buffett's wife Susan Thompson passed away, and 2 years later he married Astrid Minks, his longtime companion, who had been living with him since he and his wife Susan Thompson began living separately in 1977, although they stayed married until her death. Warren was known for living a rather minimalist life. In 2006, it was discovered that Warren didn't carry a mobile phone. He didn't have a computer at his office desk, and he drove himself around in his own car, a Cadillac DTS. In the same year, Buffett announced that he would be donating 85% of Berkshire Hathaway's holdings to charities in the form of donated common stock, with the biggest contributions going towards the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, making this the largest charitable donation in history. He was included in Time magazine's 100 Most Influential People in the World in 2007. During the subprime mortgage crisis in the Great Recession of 07-08, Berkshire Hathaway earnings tanked 77% in the third quarter of 2008. During this time period, Warren also assumed the position of the wealthiest man in the world with a net worth of $62 billion, passing Bill Gates, who had held the position for the last 13 years straight. In the period of 2008 to 2009, Warren's net worth dropped by $25 billion due to a combination of the effects of the recession, as well as the fact that he had donated billions to charity. In a 2009 interview, Warren told reporters that he believed that the economy could be heading for 1970s inflation levels, which could have led to more painful years of stagflation. In a 2009 statement to his Berkshire investors, Warren reflected on one of his bad investments in ConocoPhillips, saying, I bought a large amount of ConocoPhillips stock when oil and gas prices were near their peak. I in no way anticipated the dramatic falls in energy prices that occurred in the last half of the year. I still believe the odds are good that oil sells far higher in the future than the current $40 to $50 price, but so far I've been dead wrong. Even if prices should rise, moreover, the terrible timing of my purchase has cost Berkshire several $billion. Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg all promised to donate at least half of their total wealth in a signed promise known as the Gates-Buffett Giving Pledge, where they not only donate but invite other wealthy individuals to follow in their footsteps. In 2010, when questioned about the role credit agencies played in the Great Recession, in defense of the credit rating agencies, Warren stated, "Very, very few people could appreciate the bubble. That's the nature of bubbles. They're mass delusions." In 2011, Warren had preferred stock in Goldman Sachs that paid an average of $1.4 million in dividends a day. The Federal Reserve gave Goldman Sachs approval to buy their preferred stock back from Berkshire Hathaway, to which Warren replied, "I'm going to be the Osama bin Laden of capitalism. I'm on my way to an unknown destination in Asia where I'm going to look for a cave. If the U.S. Armed Forces can't find Osama bin Laden in 10 years, let Goldman Sachs try to find me." He was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2011 by President Barack Obama. In 2012, Warren was diagnosed with prostate cancer in a routine test and had to undergo chemotherapy treatment for 2 months every day, after which he revealed that he was glad to say it was all over. In 2013, Warren was interviewed and told the reporter that he still used a Nokia flip phone, had only sent one email his entire life, and reads 5 newspapers from the Omaha World Herald every day, a company he had acquired in 2011. In 2014, Berkshire Hathaway shares hit $200,000 per share for the first time, putting the total market capitalization of the company at $328 billion. By this point, Warren had given away a lot of his Berkshire stock, but he still held on to 321,000 shares, which were worth $64.2 billion.